So today's show is pretty exciting because it finally won't be just me talking. Today we have our very first guest on the show, Ryan Tanoue, and we're going to be talking about something I've received quite a few questions about and have seen a lot of confusion and uncertainty surrounding it in the shooting community, and that is how to use electronic trainers such as the SCATT system in a way that will really help you improve. So for those who don't know, SCATT and other electronic trainers are they're sensors that you attach to the end of your barrel that, when paired with the accompanying computer software, will show you your trace on a laptop or computer screen. And as you can imagine, having this data can be an invaluable way to evaluate your shot process and find ways to streamline what you're doing, track progress in your skills over time, and identify any problems that you could be having that maybe you didn't notice before. So to give you an example, if you happen to see on your trace after you take your shot that right before the trigger breaks over your hold, that is maybe in the center of the 10 ring, it jumps out to the side a little bit, then you can identify that as most likely being a triggering problem. And then at that point, you can start looking for more in-depth problems associated with that. So where may that triggering problem have come from? Maybe your trigger shoe is at an angle, or maybe it's too far forward, causing you to apply pressure a little bit to one side or the other. Or maybe you're just not having a nice smooth trigger squeeze, but maybe snapping at it instead. So SCATT offers a really nice way to look at each shot and identify what it is you're doing well and what it is that could use improvement. So with that intro, let's bring in our guest. Okay, so thanks for coming on, being the first guest. It's nice I don't have to hear only my own voice on this one. So you mind, first of all, just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and what your involvement's been in competitive shooting and kind of what it is you're doing now?
All right, sounds good. My name is Ryan Tanoue. I'm currently the head rifle coach at Ohio State University. I was a collegiate competitor for the University of Nevada, Reno from 2001 through 2005. I was a U.S. national team member from 2002 through 2008, and actually got my competitive start in shooting in sporter, air rifle, and BB gun. So started off doing that back in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I worked my way up, and I'm at Ohio State now. So just that.
Cool. All right, well, so I kind of warned you, but today's topic is about SCATT and kind of how to make best use of it in training and decipher whatever info you can get out of the traces and the numbers. So especially as air rifle shooters, a lot of us like to make pretty heavy use of this technology, and I know that you're pretty experienced with it, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it specifically. But what would you say are some kind of like the biggest benefits of using SCATT in training, and where can you get the most value, and where does it really help a shooter improve?
Right, so I absolutely think that the SCATT is probably one of the best tools that you can use to help yourself perform better. I think at any level, doesn't matter if you're world-class level or collegiate level or junior level, I think it's a tool that can help anybody and everybody to improve what they're doing. I think the most important thing to remember about the SCATT, and I have to deal with this kind of issue with everybody that I help with the SCATT, is just to remember that the SCATT is a tool that we use. And so it's not like a magical device that you can just hook up and you're going to shoot better after you watch the traces or whatever. That's not it. The SCATT's just a device that can help you to see and help your coach to see maybe, things that you would not be able to see otherwise just through looking through the sights. And so all of that information that it gives you, whether it's the trace lengths or your actual hold characteristics or some of the other more technical data that you can take away from the SCATT, I think the most important thing is finding a useful way to take that information and have that information help you to get better. And I think that's also the biggest challenge of the SCATT. And I feel like that's an area where people get frustrated with it. Is you buy it and you spend however much money it is, depending on the model you buy, and then you hook it up and you use it. But then if you don't really know how to use the data and how to use the information, then it kind of ends up being kind of another cool toy that you have, but maybe not the most useful piece of technology that you have at your disposal. So I think like I said, the most important thing is to remember it's a tool, and then doing the very best you can to find useful ways to take the information that it gives you and use that to help you to improve what you're doing.
So do you have anything that comes to mind which would be, I don't know, kind of the basic ways that somebody who's brand new to it could implement it in their own training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you first get out of the box and you're using it, I use the SCATT, whether it's with my team or myself in the past. I really only focus on the shot screen, so where you can actually see the traces and watch your hold and do all those things. I really don't use too much of the other data like the graphs and those types of things. Mm-hmm. For me, I think the biggest thing is you actually get to see what you're doing, in terms of how you come onto the target, what your hold looks like, and where you're shooting the shot within your hold, all there on the screen. And so I think for anybody that's just getting started in using the SCATT, one of the things we always talk about in shooting is consistency. And so you want to have, especially in air rifle, but then each position as you're using the SCATT and 3 position as well, you kind of want to have your hold and your shot patterns and all those things look similar shot to shot. So in standing, for example, if your approach typically comes down from the top and then you settle and you shoot, you want every shot to try to come from the same place or very close to the same place in terms of when it comes onto the target, what your hold looks like, the timing, and those are some of the other pieces of information that the SCATT gives you that are useful, whether that's your overholding or your underholding, or you have a good, you have good timing. All these things can be kind of found out by using the SCATT. And so, like I was saying, I think just for someone getting started on it, go ahead, take a look at what your holds look like, and then try to figure out, okay, how do I want to go about making them so they're the same, in some way, shape, or form, whether that's with the approach or whatever. And that gets you started on that process of using it as a tool.
Mm-hmm. All right, so when you personally were training, you were out here at the OTC for, how long were you out here?
It was a little less than a year.
Okay. So you pretty much had access to it every day if you wanted to. So how would you kind of build it into your training plan? How much would you go ahead and use that?
That's a good question. For myself, I think when I was using the SCATT and it was the most effective for me was when I would kind of separate it away from, I guess, what I would call my regular live fire training. And so I would dedicate a certain amount of time. It usually wasn't every single day, but I would say definitely 2 to 3 days a week where I was going to go and dry fire on SCATT, and that was it for that amount of time. So let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was going to go in, hook up the SCATT, get going on that, do an hour or 90 minutes of SCATT training, and then I was going to go over and shoot live fire separate from that. I think there's a lot of people that try to combine live fire with the SCATT work, and I don't think that that's a bad thing or that's a problem necessarily, but I think the best use of the SCATT is to help you with more of the technical aspects of what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think separating off that part of your training, kind of similar to how we separate off the balance work and the dry firing and the relaxation type of thing and the stretching, you do those in their own place, separate from live firing, and then you go live fire. I think using the SCATT in that way I felt was very effective.
Okay. For, say, a younger shooter who's kind of just getting into it, at what point do you think that using a SCATT will actually kind of be beneficial? Is there kind of a too early point, do you think?
I definitely think somebody that's within maybe the first year of shooting, that might be maybe a little too early, just because I think
information overload.
Yeah, exactly. I think that might just be too much. I think in the first year or even 2 years of shooting, you're just trying to get everything figured out, not to feel weird in the positions, and you're getting new equipment pretty often during that time. So I think I feel like, in my opinion at least, the SCATT is going to be a little better for people that are slightly more well established in terms of their positions and their technique and their equipment to a certain degree. But I wouldn't say that it's bad for somebody that's just getting started either, as long as they have a coach that understands at least the it, and then that way the individual shooter is not having to absorb all of that information on their own, while also just getting started shooting, then I think that would be fine.
Okay. And one last question, because I've gotten this one a few times myself and have not been able to answer it. I'm not sure that you will either, but are you familiar with any other brands of electronic trainers? I guess there's a few other ones out there that I don't really know much about, but do you have any experience with those?
Yeah, I mean, there's several other electronic trainers, whether you're looking at the Tanoue or the Rika. I just feel like nowadays you don't see those as much with how popular and easy to obtain the SCATT units have gotten. But all of the electronic trainers are trying to accomplish very similar things. They're just trying to give us as shooters more information about what we're doing technically. And so the brand really is irrelevant in a lot of ways, but I prefer the SCATT personally just because they're easier to get, they're easier to work with, easy to implement, and they also give very good information. And so it's kind of like any other piece of equipment that we use in shooting. There's a lot of different manufacturers that make lots of stuff. Some are more popular than others, and there's lots of reasons for their popularity. But each piece of equipment is trying to accomplish a specific goal, whether it's a hand stop or a sling or a glove or whatever. They have their own place in what we're trying to do, and the electronic trainers have their place as well, which trying to give us more information.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on and doing this for me.
No problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later then.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
So if you're still wondering, okay, well, how exactly should I implement this, then I'll just explain to you what it is that I do with it and how I use it in my own training. And maybe you'll want to do exactly what I do, or maybe you'll tweak it a bit to better serve your own needs. So right now, I'm mainly focusing on air rifle standing only, and I try to use SCATT at least a few times per week and generally every other practice, probably. So what I'm looking for is having a perfect approach that comes straight down the numbers on the target and does not go below the 10 ring. This is one of my main focus areas when I'm looking at my SCATT traces. Also, I'm trying to be more and more picky about where my hold is centered. So the SCATT displays numerical values for what percentage of time your hold in the last second is within the area of a theoretical 10, and that value is labeled 10AO. And it also shows what percentage of time your hold in the last second is within the area of the actual 10, labeled just 10.0. So often I find that while my 10AO values, and again that's the percentage of time that I'm within the area of a theoretical 10 anywhere on the target, often I find that while those values are maybe 100%, that my 10.0 values, or the percentage of time I hold is within the actual 10, is lower than that. So that means that while my hold is excellent, it is not perfectly centered on the target, which means I'm probably giving up points. So being able to see those numbers is a good way for me to see how picky I'm being about my hold, and also being able to see the improvement that I make from practice to practice. So another thing, as a high school student, what I did, essentially all of my training was done on SCATT in my parents' basement, just dry firing. It's kind of funny because the one we had must have been one of the very first models. We got it secondhand, really cheap. But the sensor, the way it worked was it had little knobs on it that had to be adjusted by hand to calibrate the system, whereas now it automatically calibrates just based on where you're pointing when you take your first shot. But I mean, I would set up to shoot prone and have to get out of position every shot to reach all the way up to the front of my barrel to try and adjust the knobs, then get back in position and shoot another shot until I finally got it calibrated. But this took a lot of time and work, and it was time consuming and frustrating, and it's now much, much easier to do. But yeah, in high school I would end up just practicing one position for an entire week just because I didn't want to have to adjust the sensor when I would have to change position. So those new models are much more user friendly and almost more of a joy to work with, really. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to use a system if you don't know already. These electronic trainers are really excellent training tools that can make a huge difference if they're used appropriately. So you might want to think about getting one for your club or maybe even just for yourself. The new ones are quite expensive, but you might be able to get a good deal somewhere on a used one. So, as always, thanks for listening, and if you have any further questions on today's topic or requests for future topics, please let me know by leaving a comment on the YouTube video or send me an email at olympicshootingpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're new and don't know, these shows are available through YouTube and also iTunes podcasts. And if you're an Android user, you should be able to download the Podomatic app and subscribe to the show through there. Happy training, and talk to you next time.